Greetings everyone, my name is Buck Business. Konnichiwa, I'm Kawaii Critic, and today we are here to review My Little Pony Season 9, Episode 4, Twilight's 7, the 200th episode of My Little Pony. Now, before we can even begin this review, it should be stated that how this all came together is that this was apparently all the actors' input on what they wanted to see their characters do. And they all clustered all of those ideas into one episode. So, already, you could probably see the issue with that many people trying to cram all those ideas into one episode. And a lot of people are probably going to be comparing this to episode 100 of MLP, and I'm just going to save you some time and say episode 100 was way more bombastic and way more crazy and had way more crazy moments that just were out of control. I mean, I don't think this episode was going to peak past a bunch of ponies riding on a boombox, jumping over a shark, and then having a gator monologue to the audience. That's just not going to happen, and it didn't happen, so yeah. And the other thing is that we're going to be saying a lot of things that are probably going to sound like we don't like this episode, because it's another not great episode. I can't believe a lot of people are saying that Season 9 is fantastic. It seems to me that so far currently, Season 9 is the worst season so far, but I digress. Let us jump right into it. So, we begin this episode with Spiky-kun delivering some special mail from their brother, and I'm going to refer to it as that because that's kind of an obvious setup, about this specific crown, whatever they call it, so I'll just call it the sibling crown for short. I forget exactly what the name was. So the two of them rush off while they leave Miss Glimmer-san in charge of the school temporarily, even though that was kind of going to end up being her job anyways, but whatever. So they end up going there, and when they meet up with the brother, he essentially kind of gloats that he currently has the crown, and goes over exactly what they want them to do. This obviously also incorporates the two sisters, Celestia Shan, who wants more guards all over, which is a nice touch and an overall pinpointed mark to the previous episodes, although that makes you kind of question why didn't they do that after the first bunch of attacks made on there specifically, but you know, whatever. Anyway, so they leave it up to Twilight-san to break in, successfully take the crown, and according to the line, get out. As in, I think that was a poor writing choice of them saying get out, because no one actually gets out of the castle, but we digress. So, from there, she suddenly decides to go back to the main six, even though she probably could have just teleported the crown to herself and flew off, ? I mean, that would have just ended the episode right there. Was Twilight really not considering just doing the quick job and just not flying out on her own with the crown in hand? What would have been wrong with that? It would have just proved that she could have done it. But nonetheless, she gets the others to join in on it, and they all incorporate their ideas. So we have Rarity-san and Rainbow-san both doing their investigation biz as they're making their altered plans at this point. We see that Pinky-san wants to go to the moon. Applejack-san has this sort of, quote, secret life, although I don't know if that really makes a whole lot of sense. And if you actually pay close attention to the background, you see that the family was always trying to get in to see her. But her shows grew and grew, but I guess the ponies just knew her as Apple Cord, as they called her. Nonetheless, we end off with Fluttershy-san and Spiky-kun, who conveniently says, I want to try being a spy. If there wasn't already an obvious hint at the beginning of the episode with him saying that he wanted to win this brotherly or sibling competition at the very intro, they drop another obvious hint of him saying he wants to be a spy. But Twilight wants to know what she wants to do, or what she can do, but Rarity suggests that she actually does nothing. So the plan proceeds, the several plans proceed, and this episode technically is based off of Ocean's 11, if you did not know. So, like in Ocean's 11 fashion, they make a plan, which we do see at the beginning. If I do remember Ocean's 11 correctly, it has been a while, but they do make a plan, and then something is obviously obfuscated for later, like the main crux of how the thing was stolen, while a bunch of other characters act as distractions. That is usually the Ocean's way. Again, if I remember that movie correctly, it has been a while. But, nonetheless, the episode still provides too many obvious hints that what is the end is coming, which we're just gonna say it now. Obviously, Spike wins this contest. But here's where things kind of fall apart for me as a concept, is when Fluttershy and Spike get stuck. And this is where things, again, just get really confusing. Spike claims that he feels left out of this whole sibling dynamic, and I really question why he's thinking or feeling that way, when in previous episodes we have seen how many times Twilight has entrusted Spike, and there has been that strong family dynamic between just the two of those. And if I do remember correctly, yeah, it is a bit of a retcon from the first episode, which was more of a, quote, mother figurehood. They quickly switched that out to be more of a brother-sibling sort of status. But yeah, it just doesn't fit with a lot of other episodes where there is a clear family dynamic between even Spike and Twilight Sparkle. So his sort of whole logic of thinking just sort of seems to come out of nowhere. Now, to give this episode credit, if you were to take this episode out of the canon, out of the continuity of every other episode, then I suppose it does make sense. After all, Twilight does mention the whole being the big brother when all the plans, or being the little brother when all the plans start to fail. He goes in for the hug, and the hug is denied, and I guess that's enough for him to start to think that. Again, in the context of this episode, not in the entire show, though. That is where this episode falls apart. The continuity just doesn't feel like it fits at all. So, after the plans fall apart, Spiky-kun suggests that they go back to Twilight-san's original plan by having everyone do what they were good at doing in the first place, and it actually ends up working expertly as they move in. They do the party from Pinkie Pie-san, they do Rainbow-san flirting with that one guard to get into that one area. That happened actually earlier, but now that they are inside, they sort of meet up with the other two, as you see in this image. We see Fluttershy-san tame these geese that the brother has put together to act as a guard, and so on and so forth. So all of the main 7 at this point, I'm just going to call them the main 7 because that is sort of what this episode is implying as well, I suppose. They all now make their way inside the castle, inside that specific room where the crown lays. And at this point, the brother comes out and, in a mocking fashion, says that he was already there and already knew that Twilight was coming in. Thus, as he continues to gloat, the crown is suddenly teleported and Spike speaks up, puts the crown on, and everyone is suddenly shocked. Spike explains that he saw that Luna was upset and made a deal with her to make sure that Celestia would not be around the vicinity, and made his part crystal clear that he would mess with the balloon and make sure that everyone was all in the same area at once, and then Luna could do her business. Her sneaky, sneaky business. And Spike seems upset when he wins for a moment, because Rainbow kind of suggests not that both of them lost, who's gonna win, and the two of them look at each other, and they of course name Spike the champ of this whole sibling rivalry thing they had going on. And again, within the context, if you just consider this a non-canon episode, yeah, again, it does kind of fit. Even in the flashbacks, you see that only Twilight and Shining Armor were a part of this competition, while Spike, being a baby, was, I guess, not allowed to be a part of it. And I guess that continued on even as they grew up, so he was just sort of left out, question mark? I think the flashback would have helped if it kind of went on for a little bit longer in terms of just showing like them in a more recent competition where Spike was a little bit older, just to show that he was still being left out. I think that would have been extremely crucial if that's what they were trying to tell within this. Again, I'm going to consider it a non-canon story to everything else that exists in this show. And that is that. So, again, as a non-canon episode, I suppose this episode is fine. It's actually kind of fine. But when you start to think of it within every other context, it sort of falls apart instantly. And I hate to be the one to say this, but the whole Spike not feeling related thing kind of leaves still a bitter taste in my mouth, especially after the episode where Spike had to deal with that fake dad character. I already forgot what his name was. And having him to deal with that, again, it just sort of feels incomplete. It feels like an incomplete story. And doing it this way, it doesn't feel like it completes that story at all. Because I'm still questioning, well, where's Spike's real parents? Are they even alive? Again, I'm going to reiterate what I said back in that episode. I think, actually, this could actually work as a replacement 200th episode as well, is that I think it would have been wonderful for Spike to actually meet his real father. His real father. And I think this actually could have doubled down to be a really great moral-based episode, because it would have covered a moral that we have technically have not seen in the show yet. This episode feels, even with its moral, it seems to retread ground that we have seen before in terms of morals. But the moral of the whole father thing, let me get to this, I'll repeat what I said back in that episode, is that you have Spike's real father be sort of this ruler of dragons in another area, separate from Ember, in a separate clutch of dragons, if you will. And he is the leader of this organization of dragons. And, he has Spike as the egg. Obviously, he would be an egg at this point. And he's looking at the dragon life around him, and he sort of starts to fear for Spike's upbringing. He doesn't want Spike to live like other dragons. He doesn't feel comfortable with it, but he doesn't feel like, because he's already the ruler of the dragons, he doesn't want to leave his other dragons behind. He can't give it up because he has an obligation. That's what's crucial about the decision, is that it's not 100% bad. It's a morally gray sort of area, like our background. And what you could have had is that, the reason why we haven't met Spike's real father up until this point is because he was busy trying to lead his clutch of dragons his way, but sort of struggling with that, going back and forth, trying to, do all that stuff. And only now, maybe, you can have a pretty easy explanation that things have sort of calmed down after all that amount of time. So he has actually had some time to look for his son and find him. And that he willingly gave his son to Celestia as an egg to grow up in the pony world, to be surrounded by and grow up with ponies, so that his upbringing would be massively different from what it would have been if he had grown up with other dragons to begin with. Again, I think that's a much stronger concept, and again, you could tie it into Twilight's story. Especially in this season, that is such a missed opportunity, because Twilight is about to take over all of Equestria. The balance between looking out for a kingdom and looking out for your family, that is such an interesting dynamic. That is such a beautiful dynamic, and they absolutely missed that opportunity to do here. And again, meeting Spike's real father, I think, would have been a very special moment. Since this technically is a Spike episode, I think switching it out for Spike meets his real father would have been a more beautiful story to tell, a more emotional story to tell for Spike, and to also teach Twilight a lesson that she has technically not learned yet. And I don't know if they're going to cover that later on with the episodes ahead, but as this episode is now, I feel like most of it's pretty tame in comparison, again, to even episode 100. It is, again, it feels very non-canon based with how it was written. And again, if you consider every other episode, then this episode, I feel, again, just sort of falls apart. So, this episode, within the context of everything else, sucks. And if you consider it non-canon, then at best it's kind of okay. Mediocre at best. And mediocre at Season 9 still isn't even good enough. So, Season 9 is off to a tremendously rough start. But if you did enjoy this review, then please feel free to like, comment, and, well, since we'll be heading off, you can subscribe to the main channel. And until next time, everyone, farewell. Bye-bye.